Michael Cohen is the former longtime personal lawyer to Donald Trump, and apparently he didn't just do law, he also did secret recordings, including in the months leading up to the 2016 election, in which he recorded a conversation with Donald Trump about payments they planned to make to a former Playboy model who alleges she had an affair with Donald Trump. And they wanted to pay her off so that she would not talk about it in the run-up to the election. The former model, Karen McDougal, says she began a nearly year-long affair with Trump in 2006, shortly after Trump's wife Melania gave birth to their son Barron. Ms. McDougal sold her story eventually for $150,000 to the National Enquirer, which was supportive of Trump during the final months of the presidential campaign. But the tabloid sat on the story, which kept it from becoming public. I guess they couldn't fit it. There's too much other news. And so they never ended up actually covering the story, which is too bad. It happens here sometimes too.
So the boy who was trapped in a refrigerator ate his own foot, and that story needed to be covered.
Yeah, it's timely. Okay.
Plus, aliens happen to land just that week.
That's right.
Exactly.
And the week after, and the week after. There's a definitive proof that they buried it a little bit later in this story.
Exactly. Now, we got access, well, we didn't get access, but access was granted to these recordings when the FBI raided Michael Cohen's office earlier this year. The lawyers in favor of, or the ones defending Michael Cohen, apparently shared it with Donald Trump's lawyers. Obviously, they did not cop to the presence of these until it was eventually released earlier today. But they have had access to it. We have been alerted to the fact that there are probably other tapes as well. Now, that doesn't mean that Donald Trump is willing to admit that anything bad happened. His other lawyers, the replacements for Michael Cohen, have come forward to talk about it. Rudy Giuliani, who is still technically his lawyer and not just the guy who goes on TV to get him in trouble every day, confirmed in a telephone conversation on Friday that Trump had discussed payments to Mrs. McDougal with Cohen in person on the recording. He said it was less than 2 minutes long, said Trump did not know he was being recorded and claimed that the president had done nothing wrong. And Rudy Giuliani specifically said nothing in that conversation suggests he had any knowledge of it in advance.
He said the tapes were exculpatory, in fact.
Yeah, exactly. I love the idea he didn't know about it in advance, and the conversation was less than 2 minutes long, which means that they can really wrap these things up fast. Like, you alert me to the possibility that this woman is lying about an affair, and I authorize a gigantic payment like that.
Right.
No big deal.
It's like, it's a great point, John. It's a fact, because it's like when in every movie that doesn't work narratively, where the cops get on the plane to fly from New York to Vegas to pick up the key suspect in the murder. They land, we see them get on the plane, then later we see them landing, getting off the plane, and one cop says to the other, "So where do you think he is?" And you're like, what did you people talk about for 5 hours on the plane?
So yeah, let's break this down. First off, don't believe anything Rudy Giuliani says. He says, oh, it's exculpatory. No, it's not. Why do you think they're trying to get ahead of the story? It's explosive. That's why, I mean, technically he didn't say he knew about it ahead of time. Now, it might be that what Cohen says on the tapes, and we obviously don't have the content of the tapes here, but we have a lot of stories about people who did listen to them and then give these stories. So it's possible that in the tapes, Cohen calls Trump and says the payment by the owners of the National Enquirer has been made, right? So, and Trump goes, good, okay, and it gets wrapped up in 2 minutes. Now, Giuliani goes, see, he told him about it afterwards. To John and Ben's point, if you heard somebody called you randomly and said, hey, this woman you've never heard of that you might or might not have had an affair with, somebody else paid $150,000 to shut her up, would you be like, oh, okay, that's interesting, I'll see you later, right? No, that means that's a thing you normally do. Good, I'm glad it was taken care of, right? This is so obvious. And I'm done trying to convince Trump people that, like, oh, no, yeah, that's totally normal. Yeah, if somebody called me, I'd say $150,000 for an affair I might or might not have had, I could wrap that up in 2 minutes, right? Okay, all right, fine, you're a lunatic, I don't care to discuss that with you. Okay, for everybody else, it's super obvious what happened, okay? But there's two other parts of this that are monumentally important. One, Giuliani admitting it takes away the possibility of one other defense Trump could have done in court, which is attorney-client privilege. So it is either a failing of his, which is the first analysis that a lot of people did, or he's actually trying to hide the other story. So let me do the first one, okay? So a lot of people, as soon as Giuliani said that, a lot of lawyers and former prosecutors came out and said, why in the God's green earth would your own lawyer do that? That takes away your ability, in case you could, of saying attorney-client privilege. You want to reserve all your rights before going into court. This is negligence.
Democrats have told us you hold your powder.
But in the case of the law, you actually should, right? And so, and one theory was Cohen actually tricked them, that the courts had not already passed it on to the prosecutors and that it was privileged, and Cohen leaked it, thereby getting Giuliani and Trump to believe that the prosecutors had it. And so then Giuliani's like, oh yeah, it was fine, there's nothing wrong with that call. And it's like, boom, got you. So if that's the case, that's interesting and well played by Michael Cohen, who had to be advised by someone to do that.
He's being advised by Lanny Davis.
Yeah, so by the way, that's in a quick aside. Another thing of like, has Michael Cohen flipped on Donald Trump? That's over. Lanny Davis is the most pro-Hillary lawyer and maybe person in the country. He's been with the Clintons his whole life. You do not hire Lanny Davis if you haven't flipped on Donald Trump. It's not a question. Anyone who thinks it's a question hasn't followed politics in the last couple of decades in America. Lanny Davis is, in essence, not only a lawyer, but a Democratic operative.
I mean, a Democratic operative, loathed in many ways, even by establishment mainstream Democrats. He's such a conservative Democrat.
Yeah, but
yes.
In the Clinton camp, clearly in the Clinton camp, okay? I'm keeping it real, and you could hold out against him, but that's overwhelming evidence that Cohen is not with Trump anymore.
Davis said that this is the new Michael Cohen.
Yeah, it's over, it's over. He flipped, I mean, in essence, right? So, okay, now the explosive part. All of that is fun. That was actually an appetizer. So I had this theory when I read it. I was like, no, there's something wrong with this story. You don't get out ahead of a story like this unless you're trying to cover up something else. And then Ron Blitzer wrote about it as well on I think, on Law and Crime. And I was like, okay, good, I'm not the only one. And so it doesn't mean we're right, but they talk about the tapes. Everybody acknowledges the tapes. Okay, there's a tape of him talking about McDougal, the Playboy model.
I think I know what you're gonna say.
There's another Playboy model, Sarah Bouchard, who they claim had an affair with Brody, the Republican financier of Donald Trump, and had an abortion. And they paid her not $150,000, $1.6 million. That's a whole nother level, like perhaps if you had an abortion. She did have an abortion. They came out, and just like in this story, Brody raised his hand immediately. It was me, and you caught me. No, we didn't catch you. Why did you raise your hand? That was really weird, right? And it was not for the abortion. It definitely wasn't. I didn't. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. Well, she did. But the 1.6 million was not for the abortion. So there has been an ongoing theory written by the New York Magazine and many others that
Brody is fronting for Trump.
Yes, that Bouchard did not have the affair with Brody. She had it with Trump, and in fact, it was a way of paying for Trump's abortion.
And if Brody did that, did he receive anything for that?
And if he did, that is a massive crime. Yeah. Okay.
But we know that the contracts, the defense contracts that his company got, went from
huge.
Like, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but on this scale, $80 in contracts to $627 million in contracts that he's gotten since Donald Trump came.
Yeah, so that's a long story, and I've talked about it on the show before. He gets contracts for the United Arab Emirates for over $600 million. Donald Trump does favors for the United Arab Emirates and is opposed to Qatar, which is what they wanted.
Huge switch in American policy without explanation.
Yeah. Yes, and then finally, that's why when Giuliani comes out and goes, yeah, the McDougal tapes, yeah, that McDougal, yeah, man, we did that one. Oh, did I say that out loud? McDougal, though. Remember, everybody, McDougal, not Bouchard.
And also the sources saying that and in regard to those other tapes, that the other tapes are with Cohen and people of significance and consequence. That was the quote used by the source. People of significance and consequence.
You made an interesting point earlier about nothing can divorce Trump supporters from Trump. And in a sense, this is just going to make them feel more enthusiastic because there's a religious component to it. And I'm not talking about the missionary position. The religious component is this idea held by Trump supporters that God works through the most unlikely characters, right? So the worse Trump is, the more immoral he is. To this group of supporters, the more it affirms the magic of God's power working through this incredibly unlikely character.
How do you reason with people who don't use reason? Yeah. So because if you said that, okay, well then Clinton's immorality, which you said was the worst thing in the world, should be God working in mysterious ways and showing his magic. No, that's immoral. Trump doing something way worse, God's magic.
Well, Obama, they said, was literally the Antichrist. Wouldn't that be the ultimate way for God to work? Through the Antichrist?
So by setting the stage for Trump.
Maybe.
Who sets the stage for Bernie Sanders? What?
Okay, so I have a question for the panel, but first, like 2 little wrinkles. Just in terms of what they've claimed before, the campaign was reached out to by the Wall Street Journal right before the election back in 2016 and asked about those payments because the Wall Street Journal had found out that something had happened. Hope Hicks said, "We have no knowledge of any of this," and said that Ms. McDougal's claim of an affair was totally untrue. Well, we don't have proof of the affair just yet, but they clearly did know about it, and so they have been lying about that. That was ongoing for a couple of years at this point, and I just think this is funny. In reaction to the story today, apparently the president said, "I can't believe Michael would do this to me."
Yeah, I can't believe
Michael. Or
with
me, technically. That's a weird way to say that. But so my question though is, there are ways that theoretically that crimes could have been committed. So there's the legal and the ethical aspects, which are sort of separate. This is explosive, but how likely is this in either of those 2 areas to actually matter more than a week into the future?
So to Joe's earlier point, people are just set in their ways. We're done with it, right? So the 80% of Republicans will not move no matter what. And even if it turns out the Bashard story is true, right, and Trump paid for an abortion, they're like, oh, God works in mysterious ways, and of course the guy who's the most immoral person on the planet, according to our own ideology, is the one that he would choose to be our leader.
Right,
but they'll believe it. They'll believe it. So, and progressives already hate Trump.
But hold on, just real quick, just 10 seconds. But the second component to that story, if that story is true, that then Brody, is that how we say his name? That then he was given favors and defense contracts for stepping up and taking that payment, and he's been the middleman in these deals before. That's a crime that everyone understands. That will make it that one would make it tricky for not for Lanny Davis, for Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, and so, but that's a great point by Ben. Look, the Republican voters will not move. Look, I give you an example we talked about on the show before. Scott DeJarlais, he's in Tennessee. DeJarlais is a congressman. Turns out he paid for 3 abortions, not 1, not 2, 3. 2 with his wife, I believe, and 1 with his mistress, or 2 with his mistress, 1 with his wife. It's hard to keep up with all the abortions that he has paid for. And the voters are like, God works in mysterious ways. Who cares? We don't care about abortion. We're just lying. We're just kidding. I just hate immigrants. I don't care. I don't care. So will they care about Donald Trump's abortion? No, the voters will not care at all. They never cared. It was always a lie, right? The politicians, well, okay, maybe they have to make some uncomfortable sentences like, oh, I'm very opposed to abortion but love Donald Trump. They could walk that tight line. They've been doing it for 2 years now. But, okay, here it is. Here's a $1.6 million payoff, okay, $1.6 million payoff. Are the Republicans gonna go, yeah, I don't care. I don't care. It's obviously illegal. This guy's an obvious criminal. But I'll lose my primary. I vote with Donald Trump.
I'll tell you one thing.
I don't know.
I
literally don't know.
If something like that turns out to be true, Jeff Flake is going to take to Twitter. And he's going to be pretty angry.
For an hour.
Yeah,
I think they'll be perfectly fine with that. I mean, they got past Monday.
Well, that's a real.
What
I'm just
could possibly stop them at
saying
this
that
point?
we are entering into an area where the potential, no more than a potential, where there are serious, unambiguous crimes, right? I mean, a big part, as you know, Cenk, you're a lawyer, like a lot of, you kill somebody, that's a crime, right? But a lot of these crimes are, no, that's not a crime. My intent was this, and then you argue it, and that's why we have we may enter into unambiguous territory, and that will put a different kind of pressure on Republicans. And as always, as we get closer to Election Day, if they feel like there's an advantage to separate themselves from him, then they will separate themselves from him.
And by the way, don't get me wrong. I think they will. I think that Trump is a disaster, but also from a management perspective. And I would be really surprised if the markets didn't tumble at some point because of the tariffs or the overinflated stock market because of the insane tax cuts, et cetera. And the minute the markets suffer the donors will flip, which will make the Republican politicians flip. But that's your only hope. Not like that they develop a conscience or that the Republican voters care.
And it's a hope that would be absolutely devastating
Yeah,
for the vast majority of America.
But there is some percentage of that 80%, make up a number, that's persuadable. Give me a number.
3.
Okay, 3%. I was going to go with 8, but we'll take 6.
Okay, all right.
6%.
Deal.
And there's a whole giant swath of Democratic operatives who will run an entire campaign on the off chance that they can get that 4.5%.
Instead of running on...
Instead of just being like, there's 60% of the other people, let's just get them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of running on corruption, which is another story in the news today, it turns out we were right about that all along. #1 campaign issue. I've been telling you that for 7 straight years. Anyway, and #2 is, I love this phrasing that Ocasio-Cortez used, economic dignity. You run on that and you will crush these guys. Yeah. So Trump is a monster of a different sort, and there are legal proceedings and investigators. Let them do their job, okay? To me, that's a separate issue, okay? Well, but when you're running a campaign, run to actually help Americans. 2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below, then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.